So what is plagiarism? Plagiarism is the failure to appropriately credit the sources of words, images, and ideas. Well, I guess and sounds too, but that doesn't apply to us usually. But the Napster folks, I'm sure, would say, don't forget sounds. But for us, usually it's words, images, and ideas. Okay. Now, there's different types of plagiarism. The most obvious one is intentional stealing. Everybody knows what that is, right? When you knowingly take from another source, and you provide no citation indicating the source of the information. You act as if it was your idea, your finding, whatever. That's straightforward. Everybody knows what that is, and you know not to do it. What I've seen people struggle with in and have some really negative consequences for here at our university is unintentional plagiarism, and that can happen for a couple of reasons. One, when there's inadequate citation. Okay, so you took from a source maybe, and you cited, but something about the way you cited wasn't correct, or you didn't take it from a source directly, but it's something that should have had a citation and you should have gotten a source for. Okay, so the first example of that would be the common knowledge and opinion. And this is where oftentimes people won't have a citation for something because, oh, well, I just know it, and I put it. If there's something that's a fact and it's common knowledge and you know it and everybody knows it, then no, you don't need a citation. Barack Obama was the first African American president of the United States of America. It's common knowledge. You don't need to have a citation for that. Right? But if you say, um, uh, the so if you say something that sounds more like a statistic, like the majority of people who commit domestic violence are male, that's probably true, but you better find a source for that and cite it, because sometimes when we think something is true, well, I'm pretty sure this is right, and you say it, you might be wrong. So you need to track down and make statements that are based, if you're going to make factual statements, make them based on observable, documented facts. Right? So you have to be able to distinguish between common knowledge and uncommon knowledge. And anything that sounds at all like a statistic, twice as much, half as much, 40%, you better have a citation. Okay. The other thing people trip on is when they express their opinions, but they express their opinions really making them sound like they're facts. Right. So if it's your opinion, that the majority of people who commit domestic violence are male, then you have to state that in such a way that it's clear it's your opinion or it's based on your experience. In my experience as a crisis intervention worker, the majority of clients that I saw were women who were battered by male aggressors. And you can say that, but to say that this is how it is, you can't do that without citing something. Okay? So if you're going to have your opinion, and you can put your opinion in there, make sure that it's clearly your opinion. Okay. Okay, so you have to know the difference between common knowledge and the stuff that's not common. And then if you state an opinion, make sure that it's clear that it is your opinion, and don't state it as a fact. Right? And one way to do that is to use tentative language. It's possible that da 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 da, because you don't have to cite anything to say it's possible. It's possible the Earth could burn up in 10 years. I don't need a citation for that. Anything's possible, right? And that's clearly an opinion. Okay. Another thing people stumble on is when they have a secondary source, right? Because sometimes you'll find a really interesting piece of information in an article, especially in the introduction section of an article. And if the article you're reading cited some other source, but you only cite the article you read, hey, I found it here, that's actually plagiarism, right? Because you didn't cite the source that they cited. So you have two options, or you can cite it as a secondary source, right? So you found this really cool thing in the Smith and Jones article, but whenever they said it, they cited Garcia, right? I'm sorry. You found it in Garcia. When Garcia cited it, Garcia cited Smith and Jones. So you say Smith and Jones reported, because they're the ones that actually said the original thing, and then blah, 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 whatever they did, and at the end, parentheses, as cited in Garcia 2010. And you can do that. You're discouraged from doing that too much, because what you should do is not be lazy and go find that original source. Go find the Smith and Jones article, read it for yourself, and if you do that, now you don't have to cite Garcia. Just because Garcia pointed you towards Smith and Jones, you don't have to give them credit for telling you about an article. Right? Now, if you use Garcia's interpretation of what Smith and Jones said, then yeah, now you got to go back and cite Garcia. But if you go back and read Smith and Jones and you have your own interpretation of what they said, then you just cite Smith and Jones. And that's what I would recommend: is find the original article, track it down. It'll be in Garcia's reference page, right? Look it up, read it yourself, and then cite that directly. But don't just say Garcia said blah blah blah, and really it's something that they cited somebody else for, because that's inadequate citation, and you would be guilty, in my classes anyway, of plagiarism. Okay. Another one that people really struggle with, and I can't understand why, is the failure to indicate quotations. Right. This is when somebody uses the exact words of an author and provides a citation. What? Dr. Fiala, you just said they provided a citation. That's not plagiarism. It might be. It might not be. If you provide a citation, it doesn't necessarily mean you haven't plagiarized. If you put a citation, you say, oh, Smith and Jones, 2009, but used their exact words, and you didn't put quotation marks around their exact words, and a page number in the parentheses, or a block, either quotation marks or a block quote, right? If you didn't somehow indicate that it is their exact words, that's plagiarism, even if you have their name on it, right? Because there's a difference between having their name on it and having quotation marks and not. One, it's paraphrased, and it's your own understanding of what they said. The other, it's their exact words, and you have to give them credit for their exact words by putting it in quotes. Okay. And you say, well, I changed a couple of words. That's good, but how many words can you get away with changing? I would change all of them, but my kind of rule of thumb that I have, my forward heuristic that I use and I find helpful is, if you find yourself using 4 words in close proximity, maybe they're separated by an is or an and, but 4 kind of major words together that are exactly the 4 words of somebody else, and you changed all the other words in the sentence, go ahead and put quotation marks around those 4 words. 4 or more, go with a quote. Okay. And again, people try not to put too many quotes in their papers. In my class, because I tell you not to, and I'll take points away if you have too many quotes, because it's lazy writing. And 2, it is distracting to readers to have quote after quote after quote. Right? They want to see what's the essential information from this article, and not just what exactly did somebody else say. So you have to learn to paraphrase. And unfortunately, sometimes people, instead of paraphrasing, they'll do what I call thesaurus plagiarism. Right? That's where they just get a thesaurus out and they change each word in the sentence. None of the words are the same. Not plagiarism. And they'll cite it and they're like, I'm good, right? Well, maybe. That's kind of a gray area. I mean, technically, not plagiarism. It's certainly crappy writing. And in my opinion, I think it is still plagiarizing, because you're plagiarizing the structure of the sentence. Right? So better off to leave it as is and put quotation marks around it, the original thing, or really do make the effort to paraphrase. And paraphrasing can be challenging. but it's important I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I challenge students to do it, is because it really challenges you to think about the material in your own words and convey your own understanding of it. Because nobody wants to read your book report of other people's articles. They want to read the synthesis of information and new ideas, new perspectives on existing findings. Right? And that's why we really push you to paraphrase and not use a bunch of quotes. And then one other instance of plagiarism to look out for is self-plagiarism. And this is using stuff that you've written before and not giving yourself credit where you wrote it earlier. This sounds kind of simple. Think, well, how can I plagiarize myself? But you can, and it still is plagiarism. Technically, for plagiarism, it only counts for things that you've published. But in terms of academic dishonesty, it also does apply to things in classes. Like if you write a paper in one class and then use substantial portions of that paper in another paper in another class, that constitutes academic dishonesty, but not necessarily plagiarism as it's defined by most ethics codes. Right? It's dishonest, but not the same thing. Self-plagiarism is whenever you've published something, and then you go to publish something else, and you use the same phrases, the same words, or the same ideas. So you do have to reference yourself, and it kind of helps us keep track of when ideas have been introduced. And so it's clear that if somebody's reading it, they don't say, okay, here's an idea, no, here's another idea. Two people are talking about these different things. If you're citing yourself, it's very clear that, okay, well, they're just recycling an idea that they've printed somewhere else. It's not another author saying something else. So if you do use your own work, you do have to cite yourself. So when you have to paraphrase, we'll talk about some guidelines, tips, really. One will be to take notes when you're reading articles, and include citations in your notes. Some recent fairly high-profile cases of plagiarism in academia have been allegedly due to unconscious plagiarism, where people remembered phrases verbatim and used them in their own work, but didn't remember that they came from a particular source. They thought it was their own words. They'd forgotten that they'd read some book 5 years ago and had no idea that they'd be able to reproduce it word for word, but they did. Taking good notes will help keep you from doing that, because you'll know where stuff comes from. Sometimes that happens, you'll think, oh, I read something somewhere, they said this thing, ooh, I'm going to put that paper, I can't remember where it is, and you'll be digging through your articles trying to find who said it. Write the important stuff down as you're reading, and put the citation on the notes that you're taking. And that'll help you organize your ideas. Personally, when I do this, I like to kind of go old school. I use note cards, and I do one idea per note card. So one article might have 2 or 3 note cards. It might have 30 note cards, depending on how many ideas that I think are going to be useful to me that were in that paper. Right. So on the note card goes the idea, and also the citation. And actually, I use usually some sort of coding system for citations. I'll have a master list, like Barnes 1999 is number 1, Garcia and Goldman 2003 is number 2. And so I'll just put 1, 2, 3 on the cards. That way you don't got to write down the citation every time. And then later, when you try to write the paper, you can use the note cards to organize your ideas. And I move them around and then staple them to a piece of paper, and then go sit on my computer and start typing. I've got all my ideas in order, and I know. Here's 5 different articles that all talked about the same idea. I can put all 5 of those note cards together, right? Because the idea isn't stuck to that paper anymore. It's on one individual note card. So that's a multi-purpose tip there. Take notes, include citations in your notes, and the elaborated tip is do it on note cards. Another thing is, it sounds kind of funny, don't read and write. And when I say this, I mean don't try to write while looking at it and reading the article. Because if you read a sentence that's beautifully written, and you set the article down, and you try to paraphrase it, and you look back at the article, no, I'm still chopping, and you look at it, you're going to have a hard time, right? The memory of the exact words, which is still fresh in your head, is going to interfere with your ability to retrieve a different set of words that expresses the same main idea. It's really hard to paraphrase when you're looking at that awesome sentence. So instead of doing that, step away, and the other thing is, try to break it down. Right? Break it down to the simplest possible connection. What's the gist? What's the main idea? Okay, here's this article, and so now when I'm taking my notes on my note card, they had this, 20-word sentence, blah, 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 blah. What are they saying in 4 words? And write those 4 words down. Okay? And then when you go to write your own paper, you'll turn those 4 words into 15 words, 20 words. Probably not going to be the same exact 20 words that somebody else wrote, because you've boiled it down and you're building back up from the bare bones, the main idea that they expressed. Okay. Okay. So there's a couple of tips about paraphrasing. Now let's look at an example. This is a sentence that comes from an article by David Gleaves titled "The Socio-Cognitive Model of Dissociative Identity Disorder: A Reexamination of the Evidence." Interesting article. In this sentence, opening sentence of his article, within the dissociative disorders field, in much of mainstream psychiatry and psychology, dissociative identity disorder, DID, is conceptualized as being a post-traumatic condition resulting from overwhelming childhood experiences, usually severe child abuse. Okay, a couple things. One, the ellipsis, the 3 dots you see there, is because he also had in the sentence DID, comma, formerly multiple personality disorder, citation for that. Non-essential information, so I just cut it out. That, if you're wondering why that's there, that's why. Another thing, notice that in this sentence, Gleaves himself didn't provide a citation for his interpretation of how dissociative identity disorder is viewed. Right? And because there's not a citation there, he's indicating to us that this is his interpretation. That somebody else didn't say that DID is a post-traumatic condition. That's his view of looking at the whole body of research. Right? And he is a major researcher in the field of dissociation, so it's not surprising that he feels comfortable enough making that kind of statement. If it was a student that wrote this sentence, I would probably expect to see them cite either some other expert saying this, citing Gleaves saying it, or the other thing, if it really is their perception, give me some information to help me understand why you have that perception. So instead of citing where you got the idea from, what are you basing that perception on? So instead of just parentheses with the author's names, you have parentheses e.g. So for example, and you give 2 or 3 example articles that provide the rationale or are the basis for which you made this evaluative statement about how the field views dissociative identity disorder. Okay, away from that aside. Now, looking back at the sentence. So DID, within the field and by these other people, it's conceptualized as a post-traumatic condition resulting from childhood abuse. Okay, so the main ideas here, trying to boil it down, DID caused by childhood trauma. Conceptually, it's kind of like PTSD. Okay, so a decent paraphrase of this sentence would be, and I'm going to cite Gleaves, even though I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting, but I still got to cite, got to give him credit to his idea. So Gleaves contends, so he argues, that DID is generally viewed, so instead of conceptualized, generally viewed, as a trauma-generated phenomenon that can be linked to abusive experiences in childhood. Okay, so now I've gone from being a post-traumatic condition to a trauma-generated phenomenon. Right? And Gleaves might argue with me about whether or not I've captured his essential idea or not. Right? But that's why I cite him. So if somebody reads them, they go, I remember reading the article, I don't think that's what he said. They can go back and look it up and say, oh no, you got that wrong. That's one of the main reasons you have to cite. Because if you misrepresent somebody's ideas, they want to be able to argue with you about it. But that's an okay paraphrase. Right? Here's a not okay paraphrase. Gleaves contends that DID can be conceptualized as a post-traumatic condition that results from overwhelmingly abusive childhood experiences. And it's clearly not exactly the same as the earlier sentence, but I've kind of tried to leave the stuff in italics that is pretty much ripped off. So conceptualized as a post-traumatic condition, whereas before it was conceptualized as being a post-traumatic condition. So took out the word being, so I changed there, and then that is new. But then instead of resulting from, I have results from, and then instead of overwhelming childhood experiences, which were usually involved abuse, overwhelmingly abusive childhood experiences. So that I would say isn't changing it enough. That's kind of like thesaurus plagiarism, which I probably wouldn't bring you up on charges of academic dishonesty for doing that, but I would tell you that's poor effort, and it'd give you kind of a low grade for crappy writing. Okay. One of the other problems we talked about was knowing the difference between common knowledge and opinions, and do I need to go find a citation or not? Because I didn't get it from anywhere. It's just something I know. Do I need to find a source for it? Let's look at some things you might see in a paper and think about when you read this if it needs a citation or not. Okay. First one, Freud's influence on the field of psychotherapy is widely acknowledged. Do I need a citation for that? I would say no, but I'd recommend finding one just to be safe, and it wouldn't be hard to find somebody who said that. Most people were okay with that and would say, yeah, that's general knowledge. His influence is widely acknowledged. Now, if you started to say his influence was formative or overwhelmingly positive or anything like that, now you better find a citation for that, because people disagree about that. Some people think that he was great for the field of psychotherapy. Some people say it was incredibly damaging, but nobody really says that he didn't have some influence. Okay. So no citation required, but again, I would recommend finding one anyway. Always better to find a source and cite it than to take the risk of saying something that should have been cited. Okay. Women are twice as likely as men to help one in distress, to help someone in distress. Does that need a citation? Yes, it does. And it may be true. It generally depends on what type of helping you're looking at, what type of situation. But yeah, as a rule, women do help more than men. But you have to have a citation for it, because just because you may think I think that's true, it's not always true. And so you need to have some citation to just to kind of clarify under what situations you're basing this on. Okay. Some children might not develop appropriate social skills if their parents are not able to model appropriate social skills for them. Does that need a citation? Some children might not develop appropriate social skills if their parents are not able to model appropriate social skills. I think. No, doesn't need a citation. If, and this is a big if this is your idea, if you wrote this and this was your idea, if you thought, I don't think if their parents don't show them how to act right, they're not going to know how to act right. If that's your idea, then you can write this sentence and you don't need a citation. If somebody else wrote this idea and you said, and they wrote it in a different way, but you changed the words, you got to give them credit for the idea. If it's your idea, you don't need it. Now, if I take the word might and I change it to won't, that some children won't develop appropriate social skill models if their parents are not able to model appropriate skills for them. Now I've stated it as a fact, I got to find a citation, right? Because that tentative language, that might, changes it from a fact to a possibility. And a possibility indicates this is an opinion. This is what I think might be. If you say what something is, it's a fact and you need a citation, unless it's a commonly accepted known fact. Okay. Last one. Most teachers who don't use behavior modification systems in the classroom struggle to maintain a productive learning environment. It makes good sense. Most teachers, you can say all teachers, but it's still not tentative enough. Most indicates a majority, which sounds like a statistical thing. So more teachers than not who do something have this outcome. I need a citation for that. Right? That sounds very facty, and it's not a commonly agreed upon fact. Okay, so that one would require a citation. Okay, we'll go into more detail later about how to cite, but just here's a quick synopsis of what's needed when citing material. Generally, when you're paraphrasing, you need to cite the author or authors and the year that the source was published. or accessed for some online stuff, but some year there. And then APA recommends a page number or paragraph number for a non-paginated material, but it's not required. I don't require it, but it's not bad practice to do. It helps people finding stuff, especially if it's a long article. It's easier to find what they're looking for if they're trying to look up stuff that you cited. Whereas for quotations, it's some of the same stuff, author, year, but now page or paragraph number is required. Have to have that. Okay, so a little bit more detail required for quotations. Okay. And again, I'll talk more about the specifics of how to cite later on, but I kind of want to give you a little bit of information now. Okay. Now, last thing we'll do is take a look at some stuff related to plagiarism. So here's the bottom of the screen. You see this little picture with the hunter shooting an eland, of course, and a little text down there. Right, it says Plate 2, blah blah, the association, and then I've recreated the text on the left, original source material, so that you can see it more clearly. So this is from a book. And it wasn't on a page, so it was in between pages. After page 150 was Plate 2. After Plate 2 was page 151. So it was kind of inserted into this book. The book was Intelligence of Dogs, Canine Conscious Capabilities by Stanley Coren, published by Milan in 1994. Anywho, so we see the original text on the left, and as a brief disclaimer, so I'm not guilty of plagiarism. This material comes from a Virginia Tech tutorial website on plagiarism. So these aren't my words. So we have this text on the left and then more text on the right, and you have to figure out, is it plagiarism or not? Okay. So on the left, the association between humans and dogs began as a hunting relationship before organized agriculture had been developed. This Paleolithic cave painting dates back to about 10,000 years ago and shows a Stone Age hunter who has successfully killed an eland with the assistance of his dogs. The student wrote, "Dogs have been man's best friends since long before recorded history." Okay, that wasn't the first thing, that's fine. The association between humans and dogs began as a hunting relationship before organized agriculture had been developed. Starting to sound familiar. One Paleolithic cave painting dates back to about 10,000 years ago and shows a Stone Age hunter who has successfully killed an eland with the assistance of his dogs. Okay. So that one's pretty easy, right? Verbatim sections are lifted, no citation. So we've got the bolded sections here that are exactly the same. Even if there had been a citation here, it would still be plagiarism if they didn't put quotation marks around those words that are I have bolded here. Right. Okay. Then just got the kind of side note for APA stuff. Note the student wrote, "Dogs have been man's best friend," and put quotation marks around that. The man's best friend, they're putting quotation marks to indicate it's kind of common saying or slang, and that's common knowledge that dogs have been man's best friend since recorded history. Don't need a citation for that. But the other note is, APA style, you probably wouldn't put quotation marks around man's best friend. You would use italics instead. But again, we'll get to that kind of stuff later on. Okay, let's look at another attempt. So now, same source material, different student version. So we still have the opening sentence, dogs, man's best friend, blah, blah. The relationship between dogs and humans started as a hunting cooperative before people developed organized agriculture. One cave painting that dates back about 10,000 years shows a Paleolithic hunter who has killed an eland with the help of his dogs. Okay. So what do you think? Plagiarism or no plagiarism? Okay. Well, we don't have verbatim plagiarism. There's no kind of four words together that are exactly the same. But the idea is still obviously been lifted, and no credit given, so that's plagiarism. And the other thing, this is a really good example of thesaurus plagiarism. So even if they had provided a citation, this would still be pretty crappy writing. Like, look at the last sentence. Just focus on the last sentence for a second. Killed an eland with the assistance of his dog. killed an alien with the help of his dogs. Right? So change the word assistance to help. Left the structure of the sentence the same. Pretty much the whole thing, just changed a few words, switched around. What is it? Before organized agriculture had been developed to before people developed organized agriculture. So rearranged a few words and then dropped in a few synonyms. Still not sufficient to merit good paraphrasing. And at least need to cite the source. Okay. Okay. Let's look at another one. So, dogs have been man's best friend, blah, blah, blah. Dogs and hunters first got together as hunters. That's worse sentence. Cave paintings provide some evidence for this early teamwork. One 10,000-year-old painting shows a Paleolithic hunter and his two dogs after they've killed an eland. Okay, so now it's a fairly good job of paraphrasing. Not really well written, but that's the worst paraphrasing. But still no citation, so still plagiarism. Okay. One more side note for APA stuff. That phrase, dogs and humans first got together. Got together is a good example of colloquial language, which wouldn't be appropriate for APA style. Which obviously this book isn't psychological, not trying to conform to that style. Okay, the last one. Some experts think dogs have been companions for humans at least since our earliest records. Okay, so some experts think, it's kind of general. University of British Columbia professor of psychology Stanley Coren suggests that humans and dogs first got together as hunters. In his book, The Intelligence of Dogs, blah, 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 Coren includes a cave painting from about 10,000 years ago that pictures a hunter with two dogs and an eland they have killed, parentheses, plate 2. Right? And they have to put plate 2 because there's no page number. So now, pretty good job of paraphrasing here, and the citation isn't APA style because again this isn't a psychology article, but they didn't rip it off verbatim, and they provided enough information for you to know where the ideas came from, which is what APA style is trying to get you to do. So that wouldn't be plagiarism. It's not APA style, but it's at least not plagiarism, and that's a good thing. Okay. All right. Final thoughts. Ethical behavior requires vigilance. Right? It's not about trying to avoid getting in trouble. It's not that kind of vigilance. It's how do I make sure I do things the right way? And in most ethical lapses, at least I hope, occur because people fail to be vigilant. Not because people want to be bad. They don't want to be sleazy or cut corners. They just stop paying attention because they get distracted by other stuff and they get busy. So be vigilant that you're doing the right thing, especially when it comes to meeting your obligations to participants. Make sure that they're fully informed that you don't cause harm to them. You also may be vigilant about your obligations to society, that you're doing work that is productive. You're meeting your obligations to science, so you're conducting your work in such a way that it conforms to the generally agreed upon methods of science, and not doing pseudoscience or shady work that involves any kind of falsification of data or the stretching of claims beyond what's merited. Right? And then when it comes to plagiarism, which is a major focus, if you're unsure about if something should be cited on, I think this is kind of my opinion, I think it's common knowledge, if you're unsure, it's better to cite too much than too little. Okay, that's all for now. Take care.